Well, hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in to HETMA Presents. Today, HETMA presents a deep dive into ScreenBeam with Mr. David Lopez. We're here to explore ScreenBeam's mission to enhance education and maybe to get to know Mr. Lopez along the way a little bit. I am Ryan Gray. Today I'll be your host, and this is an exciting day for me because I kind of get to chat with somebody. It's one of my favorite, where you chat with somebody you've met a couple of times but haven't really gotten to know a little bit. And these are the sort of, meetings that carve out in your day where you're like, I wouldn't get to talk to this person otherwise. And so now I get the chance to do so. So David Lopez, thank you so much for your time. Would you introduce yourself to the audience? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is David Lopez. I'm the Global Director of Education Strategy for ScreenBeam. I've been with ScreenBeam for a number of years, almost 10 years now, and I get a chance to kind of work my way up through different areas of the company, but really focusing a lot on education. That's really my background and what we do as far as strategy in the company and directing that market on a national level here in the U.S. And then I work with other teams in Asia Pacific and Europe and Latin America and others as well.
Cool. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate the time. And yeah, you mentioned kind of education being in your history, and people are pretty easy to stalk these days. So I see a stint of what I would consider some of the best service people can be, which is in a school district working as a teacher and working in professional development. So how did that come to pass?
Yeah, so I didn't start my career as a teacher originally. I graduated from Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green and kind of was finding my way a little bit, as we all do, college students trying to figure out what we're going to do, and got into this or that, did some things on the marketing side for a long time, but ended up finding teaching as a second career. I went through an alternative certification program here in Florida to become a teacher. It ended up being something I really had taught my whole life, but I never really had the certification to teach, and so I started teaching here in Florida, where I am now, with a large school district, and worked in the classroom for a while and got used to the technology in the classroom. And I'd always been a tech person as well, kind of dabbled here and there with technology my whole life, as far as being a 90s, kid, and kind of figuring things out. It wasn't all there yet, but, the internet, my first computer was a little compact all-in-one, unit that I had, and everybody may be familiar with some of those devices, but and in the classroom, that kind of became what I kind of was known for, is using technology in the classroom. And that's where I got connected with companies like Smart Technologies. My very first classroom had a smart board in it, but it was in a box. And it was there, and nobody really knew what to do with it. So I brought my tools, and I installed it on the wall with Tapcon screws, and I got in trouble. I got in trouble. From the principal for drilling into the walls of the classroom. But, I wanted to use it. I found out what it was, and that kind of brought me into the real educational technology space and kind of understanding what that was. I ended up working with Smart Technologies after that. They flew me up to Calgary when I was a teacher, and they saw some of the things I was doing with technology, and so they flew me and a bunch of other teachers up there, and we worked with their education program, learning about more what they did. And then I kind of morphed into teaching other teachers how to use technology. And that's where I got into the professional development side with the county. And that's where I met with the folks at Microsoft, who had a program called the Microsoft Innovative Educator Program. And I got involved with that program very early on and had a chance to shape some of those things with Microsoft. And that's where I met with ScreenBeam years ago, and kind of came across ScreenBeam, and I actually used it when I was teaching, when I was training for Microsoft, and we kind of had a great synergy, and that's where I ended up where I am today, and kind of working with educators still on the higher ed level, on the elementary and K through 12 level, and kind of understanding how to use that instructional space better. So kind of a little bit of a synopsis, but
yeah,
it's
a great. And it's so great how how much across the industry, people have embraced, education as a vertical, and how many people in the AV industry, have come through working in education. They have that experience of standing in front of a classroom that's looking to you to know what you're doing and to have technology enhance that experience, not create chaos in that experience. So it sounds like you've lived a lot of what we live day in and day out in trying to make that which could be chaotic, not chaotic.
Yeah, I understand the frustration. For me, it really has been, I use a lot of different phrases that when I talk about this stuff, but sometimes it really is about letting the technology get out of the way, and having it be that way, right? But the technology still is there, but you can't let it get in the way of what you're trying to do. And so it's really what been my primary focus is not necessarily being the thing that's, always, in the forefront, but making sure that when it's needed and when it's there, it's going to work and they're going to get what you need out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love the story there of like, you find technology in the corner and you put it up on your own, and then you got in trouble for putting it up. Like, I think we all understand that too, of asking forgiveness, not permission. But then, after a certain amount of time, obviously by either like, was it, you becoming the technology leader, the person developing others, was that just, well, he seems to be good at this, so let's make him do that? Or did you really get the opportunity to sink your teeth into it? Because I know sometimes in K-12, it's kind of, you use the resources and the people that are at your fingertips.
Yeah, well, I had kind of a 5-year plan when I started teaching, to kind of get into the district level and try to see where I could go from there. I started my work at what we call here in Florida a Title I Renaissance school.
Sure.
And so it was a very diverse school with lots of different, kids with lots of all their backgrounds. And so I got a chance to work also at that level and try to understand, the relationship between teacher and student, but then the technology side kind of came into play. And that was really, I did get an opportunity because there was there was a big gap, I thought, between like what teachers they had access to a lot of stuff. And there's a phrase that I use that I talk about is, if you want more technology in your classroom, you have to show that you use what you already have. Mm-hmm. And that's a big problem, I think, in a lot of instructional spaces, is people, I want this, I want that, but they don't realize that I already have a tool that can do this, or I already have a tool that can do that. And that was my big thing, is like, look, I don't need a bunch of other stuff. I can just find ways to use what's here. And then it becomes like, oh, people said, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Well, yeah, you can do it because this, and this. And, and that's really how it came to be. And I had some opportunities in the district at that time, had a really great professional development program that I was itching to get a part of, and really worked my way into working with that team who was really great at that time. And we had a great team of educators that helped with teachers learn how to use technology better.
No, that is, I love, that's such a common experience to, I think, things that, we higher ed technology managers use all the time, because you'll have an instructor, somebody that says, I need this. And what they want to do already exists. Yes. They just haven't ever engaged with it. And so, what, like, so for ScreenBeam to have, a person in your role that has those, like, not just the knowledge of it, but that actual experience is just fantastic. It's so easy to have conversations about what our jobs are like and what the tools that can make them better are, and really the tools that can make the people we serve, more successful. So that's cool. So, so you make your way eventually to ScreenBeam in 2017, but we know the story of ScreenBeam, doesn't necessarily start then. So, you made the connection of getting, meeting people from ScreenBeam through that Microsoft fellowship, which is very cool. So I would sort of like, what could you share if people, have heard of ScreenBeam, but maybe not, know it like they know the brands that they use every day? What should they know about the company, where did it come from, and what attracted you to move your career, to advance that company?
Yeah. So ScreenBeam actually started life as Action Tech. And one of the things that was I didn't have any idea of, but I had actually been using Action Tech products before I even heard about them, and most people actually had. Action Tech they built wireless receivers and wireless routers for other companies. So like if you had AT&T, if you had, I forget all the other providers that were out there at the time, Spectrum and others. Spectrum wasn't around, but whenever Spectrum was before Spectrum and all these other companies that were out there, they actually used our receiver, Action Tech's receiver, our routers in their systems. And so that was part of, that was the OEM those. So there was millions and millions, like probably 60 million internet access devices that Action Tech had out there in people's homes, and did no idea that was Action Tech. It did say it on the back, but you thought, oh, this just came from AT&T or whatever. And so I didn't know that when I first started, but Action Tech started life as that. And then there's even more history before that, but I kind of came in around that side of things. But things like Mocha, multimedia over coax, and other things like that, Action Tech was kind of the beginnings of that technology, and really helped develop a lot of that technology. And in the beginning as well, when Intel first came out with WiDi, if you saw some of the early Intel touting what WiDi was, the ScreenBeam, the little Action Tech device, which looked something similar to this, it was not this color, it was black. Intel actually used this as their reference device for WiDi. And so Action Tech was the co-inventor of the Miracast technology. A lot of that was built around what we did as a receiver. And we are on the Wi-Fi Alliance, so kind of building some of those standards for that. Action Tech kind of built those as well early on. And even in Microsoft, working with the OEM, or with the operating systems group, the OSG, the stack inside of Windows that contained Miracast and all that, we actually helped co-engineer a lot of that with Microsoft and their operating systems group. So ScreenBeam has really deep roots into wireless display, where it came from, what it actually got started, especially obviously on the Miracast side, and what all that did. Now, we've grown obviously a lot since then, but ScreenBeam, nobody really knows that. I think that ScreenBeam actually pioneered a lot of this technology that's out there today that other people use.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And there's kind of a difference between, like you said, have your name on a box, but somebody else's stuff inside making it work, versus the people that kind of, like I said, not just fought the fight, but solved the problems at the birth of a particular technology, and then have that kind of deep understanding of it. So, and the wireless display has been a very interesting, thing of development and different qualities, and where people use it to this day now, where people just expect I can throw my Netflix on any television in the world and it's just magic, and it just works. It works in my hotel room, so I don't understand why it just doesn't work the same way everywhere else, right? So and this is just a curiosity for my side, sort of. Obviously, ScreenBeam is a name that sort of tries to say what we're going to work on in the name of the company a little bit. So I'm sure there's probably something intentional about that. But B, do you ever find that then does it sometimes box in the idea of just like, oh, well, we're just gonna beam a screen one place to another, and that's sort of what we're here to do?
Yeah, and that's our roots were obviously with Action Tech. They changed a few years ago, kind of sold off a lot of the Action Tech stuff, the routers and other things like that, and kind of became primarily ScreenBeam as a company. And it does kind of box us in a little bit as far as people's mindset about what we do. But that's again one of our big pushes right now is really talking the fact that we are more than wireless display. Our receivers now can do a whole lot more, and what we've really created with our current receivers is what I call kind of a hub of connectivity, because it involves multiple kinds of wireless display, obviously with things like your AirPlay solutions and your Chromecast solutions and your Miracast solutions, but then on top of that we've really built a receiver that is capable enough to be modular on any screen. And that's really one of the big problems that people face, I think, that we see and we've seen in the market, is that when you go down the route of having locations and buildings where you have multiple types of displays, you have one brand of display in this room, another brand of display in this room, you have a projector over here, you have a whole other LED system over here, and you have all sorts of things. What happens in those spaces is all those end up with different kinds of connectivity. You can't help it, I think, a lot of times. Even if you go with one brand, I know one company in particular, I'm not going to say the name, but in 4 years they had wireless display in their screens, but I think they changed software to do that probably, I think, 6 times in 4 years. Right. And so even in one company, you have a lot of parity to have to figure out, how am I going to connect, especially if people are wanting to have that just easy wireless display connectivity. And so by focusing that on a receiver, that at its core is really a big part of our message, is that you create this idea, what I call equity of connectivity. And I can say, when I put this receiver on any screen, on any projector, on any TV, on any display, I know that I'm going to have the same experience in any room, and I don't have to worry about, okay, when this company comes out with this new model of display, I can still get that display, but I don't have to worry about the fact that, it has a new set of parameters that now I have to go back and figure out what are my connectivities going to be in there. And so that's starting with that. That's one way that I think it's the idea is more than wireless display, because that's not just beaming my screen. That's giving me many options in doing that. But now we've actually added onto that much more.
Yeah, and going back to the beginning, right? If the focus is on the instructor, the user, the person that's coming in there, having the same experience regardless of which classroom I'm in, even though displays and other stuff is different, we know that eases people's use of technology to, for them to see what's expected, then it works. And when they run into things that are unexpected, there's friction to that.
Yeah.
So, so obviously, you're talking about being able to share from, Windows, Mac, your phone, Chrome OS, like all of the things that people are carrying. What if I'm walking into a room that's got, a ScreenBeam set up and it says, hey, it's in there. What am I doing? What is my experience like as an instructor coming in, bringing my own device? Like, what should I expect to see happen in order for me to get up on the screen and get something going and turn my attention to my students?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've always stuck with from the beginning, and I do see us kind of giving more options now, and we can talk more about that later, but, when it comes to the way that ScreenBeam operates, is we've always operated on the no apps, no dongles mentality. So utilizing the native technology that's built into the devices that people have. So if I have a Windows device, I can utilize the Miracast that's built into Windows and have that connectivity. I can also use on Windows, I can use a Chromecast if I wanted to. I can do anything that I want to. But when you get into the macOS, the iOS, most people are familiar with that AirPlay functionality, and we have that built in as well. We've also kept up with the Apple side of things, being able to do things like like proximity connections, where we're over discovery over Bluetooth, where you're not worried about the Bonjour issues that sometimes Bonjour causes, where you light up every single Bonjour device and on the network. You want to be able to do proximity connection, so we have that built into our devices to be able to do that. And then Chromecast is obviously a little bit different animal, but we have the ability to do all those, and we built in controls to help different situations. So it's the way that one of our engineers or one of our VPs described ScreenBeam is that we build the ScreenBeam to fit your network versus making the network fit your device. And so the device itself, the ScreenBeam itself, is you can see a couple of them behind me here
on your wall.
On the wall. It's a really powerful device. It's got enterprise grade antennas built into it. It's got very high security built into it. And so that at its core, by being a powerful device, it gives you a lot of options. We don't make you do what we say, versus we can say, okay, our network looks like this. Okay, well, we can do this, this, and this to make it fit what you're trying to do there. And that's been one of our big strengths, is that we're not trying to cram our device into what you're trying to do. We want to make sure that we fit what you're doing. So that's really a big piece of it as far as the basic connectivity for wireless display. But there's so much more to it. Like that's why, and that's also important, to talk about as well. For
sure, and I think that sort of everyone has a push-pull with networking on their campus, and having AV devices that are enterprise class devices that have that mindset going in. But I love that thing, which is we want to make something that works with the network environment that's there, instead of you having to go convince people to change your network based upon this device you want to use. And so sort of doing that same thing, common experience for end user, common experience for the networking side, and we're starting to get to a place where, things can be pretty comfortable, or at least less friction than usually what comes up sometimes when thinking about wireless display and things like that. Yeah, and the networking side is really a big part of it for us. The one to my the black one, that's our 1100p. That's the one. That one has the ability to connect to two different networks at the same time, because we know people are concerned about security. So if a guest comes in and they try to have that experience that you talked about, walk in, what do I do? If they have a Windows device, it's no problem, right? But if they're using a macOS device or an iOS device or even a Chrome device, you don't want to necessarily have to put them on your production network just to connect. So we have the capabilities to connect to multiple networks at the same time to allow for guest connectivity and other things along those lines. So we've really worked hard to make that experience super easy for people, and provide it to be a really seamless experience. That's why we've been really successful at colleges and universities, to give them a solution that they know they can count on and rely on when it comes to that. I think the networking stuff is really important, and you mentioned before the sort of the Apple proximity point-to-point connection. And so if there's, bless their hearts, if there are green text Android people out there who don't know what we're talking about, like who don't know what that is, like what do you, when you say proximity connection with an iOS device, what how does that work? What's actually happening to enable that connection to happen? Well, we allow discovery over Bluetooth. So generally, and again, I'm not an engineer, and I don't pretend to be, but I know that usually when you're discovering a device on the Apple side of things, what happens is you're going to search for a printer, or you're going to search for an AirPlay solution, and if they're on the network, you're going to see everything. And that's fine, but the problem is it can get really confusing if I'm searching for a particular device. And so what we allow with the ScreenBeam on the Apple side is the ability to, because Bluetooth is a close proximity solution, we allow you to, instead of discovering everything in the network, it'll actually discover display or discover AirPlay specifically over Bluetooth, which is going to be the devices that are in your direct proximity. So if there's 3 or 4 classrooms in an area, you're only going to see a few of those devices for AirPlay versus every single one of them. And that makes it a lot more comfortable, I guess, if you will, when it comes to for a teacher, especially, again, because we expect our educators, they're not necessarily expected to know everything about technology, but they want to be able to do what they need to do. And so that makes it just another thing that's easier. Yeah, that people, I'm sure, if you don't know Bonjour, you've certainly had the experience of doing something on your network and seeing somebody's speakers that are in another building and somebody else, this long list of available Apple devices, because that Bonjour service is just broadcast and it's there, it's a Resi thing, right? It's for connect everything up at home and you can see everything and it's easy and it's
residential. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not it's not meant, it's not designed like Apple, bless their hearts, but Apple TVs are not enterprise products. You're not meant to use them in that way. So marrying those things to be able to say, look, we can take that core Apple technology, it's built into their OS, so you don't need anything extra, and we're going to build it into an enterprise device that eases up the need to have to rely on that is cool. And the other part I love about that technology they have is you can do that Bluetooth discovery, and then even if you can't get on the same network, they can radio to each other without having to join a common network. And so it makes even another step to like that guest access and things you were talking about before. So you know, being able to bring all that into one box is kind of awesome. So going back then to kind of, you know, more than just a wireless display, you mentioned that 1100p behind you. I have an 1100p on my desk over here, which is very cool. What are the other things that are sort of built into this platform that sort of enhance the value beyond just a wireless receiver?
Yeah, and that's really important for us. And this is one of the partnerships, having HETMA as a partner has really something that we want to utilize to make sure that message gets put out there. Now, because I mentioned ScreenBeam can be a modular device that you can put on any display. So the idea behind it is now that the device is connected to a display, whether it's a projector or whatever it is, LED, giant LED screen, you know, or just a TV in a hallway, what else can you do with that connection? And that's what we've decided that, look, there are many other things you can do with that. So we've allow you to do full digital signage capability, and you can see some of the stuff running behind me. I've got, you know, our basic digital signage, and over here on the back behind me, you can see I've got a scrolling message across the bottom. That's our new, that's really, we're really not even released that yet, but that's our new digital signage. We're about to release it within the next couple of weeks here, a platform for digital signage. So it allows you to use the ScreenBeam, because you might have a bunch of screens in your space, but I want to be able to use them for more than just sitting there as a conference room screen. I want to be able to send content to that device. And again, I don't want to have to worry about what model of device it is. So then I have to go and figure out, well, I can just put a ScreenBeam on there. Now I've got the capabilities to do full digital signage. I've got and this comes with scheduling. It comes with, you know, creating playlists, be able to do the things you want to be able to do in a digital signage platform. On top of that, we also allow for messaging in non-emergency things. So the being able to, for example, I talk about this a lot more in the K through 12 space, but I think it certainly has applications in higher ed. I have a bunch of screens in a room in my building. Let's say I'm a building manager. I manage the business building, and I sit there at my desk, and I'm one of the front office people, and I need to send a message out to a specific classroom that says, hey, this is going on in the next, you know, hour or so. We need you to make sure and be ready for this event that's happening, or there's somebody coming in to do something. Instead of calling on the phone or interrupting the class or sending out a loudspeaker message, which nobody hears, or sending an email, which people don't read, why not be able to just send a chyron across the bottom of the screen that says, hey, this is going on here. We need you to know about it, and be able to message those screens. And again, not having to worry about what it is in the room, just put a ScreenBeam on it. That's one way to allow for better communication on a campus. And then the other way is being able to do emergency messaging as well. We have a built-in emergency message solution, but we also have a subscription option to be able to utilize the ScreenBeam as an emergency messaging solution to be able to say, in the event of an emergency, we take over all the screens and says, hey, this is going on. We need you to know what to do. And then be able to have access to that. So that's a small part of it, but that's really where we're coming from, is you still get the ScreenBeam, right? And you get it, you own it. You don't have to do anything else. You get full management capabilities without any extra cost. You get basic digital signage, you get basic alerts, basic messaging or basic alerts, and you can own that. And there's no other capital expense or operating expense. But if you want to take your ScreenBeam to the next level, now you get all these other tools that you can add on to it. And so that's a big part of our messaging right now.
And I think that the the emergency messaging to screens, especially because it's an ability for silent messaging, is so like it's in demand everywhere, and people are looking for those options. So to say I don't have to have a separate thing to do that with, it's built into the device we're already using to drive content, and like you just get to be a hero with we already have a solution for that. We already have a solution for that. So because for sure in higher ed, those everyone's got their safety stuff down these days, and having that just kind of at our fingertips is cool. I know,
and we recognize that there's already solutions out there like Raptor Technologies and Alert Us and other things like that, single wire. So what we've done as well is allow you to still utilize those things, but through an API connection. For example, Raptor is one of them that you can just still send your, go to your phone and I can send a Raptor alert and it will tie into the ScreenBeam. So utilizing Raptor's technology, but it gives them access to the screens, which they didn't previously have, right? So the Raptor doesn't have a thing that takes over your screens, but we do. So why not allow them to utilize, our stuff as well? And that's part of that, what we call administrative tools package that allows you to do that as an add-on to the ScreenBeam.
Cool. That's awesome. Okay, and then another thing to hit on before we go here is the continued growth of kind of active learning classrooms where you have multiple groups, multiple people working on separate things, coming together to show, where there's real collaborative type things going on. There's definitely times where people are looking for solutions where I could take, one computer and send it to multiple screens, or maybe have multiple people share onto a single screen, and all the multiple combinations of that sort of thing that instructors like to do. So how does like you say that 1100p, the 1100 plus help in those kind of situations?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're really excited about. I've got involved with active learning years ago. One of my very first, like outside of education, outside of the classroom that I was in, kind of working with an AV company. I actually worked with AVI SPL and doing some work with them early on. I think they're still AVI SPL. I think there was just AVI or maybe just SPL back then. Anyway. But my very first classroom that I saw that in was a prep school in Florida here, and it was a pretty high-end prep school, and they wanted some help kind of designing a space where the teacher could, have multiple screens in the room and be able to have a tablet of some sort or something to be able to control what content goes on what screen. And it costs, I think, probably close to, by the time set is done, like $30,000 or $35,000 for a room like that. This was probably 10 years ago,
right?
To do that, and this was a small math classroom in a high school, and they had the money, so they did it, And I saw that, and I'm like, that's amazing, and it was really cool. But then fast forward to even just a few years ago, I've seen those kind of spaces being built in higher ed institutions. You don't see that as much in K through 12, obviously, because it's really expensive. But I saw that, and I saw it's great. I think it's awesome. But one of the problems with it still is that it takes like a grad student there to run it, or something like that to have to do it. And so I don't know that we're gonna have a magic bullet for that solution. But what we really are focusing on in our version of active learning, and this is coming soon, is really trying to create an environment that's easy for the instructor to use, that it doesn't try to do too much, but also gives it, a very turnkey type setup where it's easier for them to do it. Because that's what part of my role is trying to figure out what does an instructor need to do in the classroom, not what bright shiny object we can create, because anybody can do that. And I do a talk called Tech Conscious Leadership, and one of the things that I see in a lot of places is this what I call bright shiny object syndrome. And somebody gets caught up, and you've you probably know this exactly what I'm talking about.
For sure.
If somebody sees some bright shiny object and like, oh wow, that's awesome, let's do it, and either nobody uses it, or it's too complicated, or it's, you spend a lot of money and then nobody's trains on it, and then so nobody gets to use it, and now all of a sudden there's this big budget hole that you've created, and you have problems with it, and so then somebody has to own it. So we're really focusing directly on that usability and what it takes to make it something that's simple and easy, but provide the right kind of tools in that environment. So I'm super excited about the active learning piece, being able to take, collaboration spaces and integrate them into both front of the room technology where the teacher is able to share, be able to take over screens and do things like that, but also be able to have students still collaborate. And so that advanced video routing is really important for us. One of the things that we're really focusing on is not having to require a bunch of additional infrastructure by being able to do this wirelessly, not just say, okay, I've got to run now a bunch of cabling to do all this. And so ScreenBeam, again, being at the forefront of that, is really trying to make sure that it's easier to implement as well.
Yeah. When talking about that and looking at some of these capabilities, it makes you real think, like, people talking about, the AV over IP revolution, and certain, like, you guys have been doing AV over IP a long time. You know what I'm saying? I actually heard somebody like, oh, eventually there'll be wireless AV over IP. I'm like, there already is wireless AV over IP. Look at it's happening right here.
Yeah.
And it enables some of this flexibility. That's cool. All right, then the last thing I got to ask, at least on kind of the current thing that's above and beyond just sharing display, is USB, and being able to route USB alongside audio and video to enable conferencing applications and bring your own device. And there's a lot of things in the market about that. So how do you guys play into that kind of the piece of the market?
Yeah, we really pioneered a lot of that as well early on by being able to take our receivers and connect cameras to them. And now when you walk into a conference room space, again, some of the deficiencies in conference rooms, I find this a lot, is you walk into a conference room and there's a really nice camera in the front of the room, but nobody uses it. They get some books, they stack up their laptop, and have the camera set up, and then everybody looks at the camera and gets an awkward view, and you get bad audio and bad video. But somebody bought a camera. So what we created was the ability to now to say, I can still do wireless display, but using that USB that comes from that camera, that goes into the back of the ScreenBeam 1100 Plus instead. And now when you connect to the screen wirelessly using our ScreenBeam Conference plugin essentially, but you can still just do basic Miracast or AirPlay. What happens is there's a handshake in the background. The display says, the computer says, oh, there's a camera there too connected to that wireless connection, and it gives you ability to connect to that camera wirelessly as well. So now you get wireless audio through the speaker on the camera if there's like an all-in-one, like I've got a Jabra Panacast here. So I get wireless camera, wireless speakers, wireless microphone, and so you get the benefit of the really nice microphones and the cameras, but you didn't have to plug anything in when you walked into the room. And the thing that I think separates us apart, because I know there's Teams rooms that do all those things and things like that, but again, this becomes a scalable solution. It becomes something that I can take two devices. I can take a ScreenBeam and a camera and plug it in, and I don't have to run any cables. I don't install one little tiny piece of software, but then I can do a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or a WebEx or whatever I want. Bring your own meeting, bring your own device. And that really is a powerful solution as well, because again, it makes it easy for someone to do that. And that's one of the things that we've really pushed and prioritized as a simple solution for a scalable meeting room.
Yeah, and I'm used to my meeting experience on my device.
Yeah.
When I come in here now, I have my same experience that I'm used to doing. I just have these other resources that come into it instead of having to, schedule it through a different thing or whatever. I just do it my way. Like really sort of it's really interesting, like you said, for the technology to disappear, the amount of like you said, of functionality that's packed into a box about this size is really cool. It solves a lot of problems. And then the other thing about it is a magnetic mount. It has a magnetic mount.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's you know what I'm saying? Yes, excellent.
Yeah, just I drilled some little magnetic plates on my wall there, put them in there. But yeah, magnetic. It's something simple, right? But it's like that makes sense. I should have that. I should have access to that to just throw it on the back of a display and
exactly,
or wherever I need to go. So
if I've got it hung up behind a TV somewhere and it's not like, oh, I need to grab and pull something out, like it's not a whole production to do it. So even down to the practicalities of it, you know, I don't have to take out a Tapcon I put in somewhere to get it down off the wall. So what are you going to do? Well,
exactly.
Okay, so given all of that's in here, and obviously, you know, from, like you said, back from the Mocha days all the way going through, like where does ScreenBeam go from here in terms of the pace of expectation? It continues to move pretty quickly. So, you know, what do you got cooking that's going to keep us looking like heroes to our faculty in the years to come?
Well, a big part of it is going to be, you know, what I talked about earlier with the ability to do the advanced video routing and other things along those lines, because we can already do, you know, we just see that being a lot more mainstream to where it just becomes what some people do on a regular basis. A lot of times what we're seeing, and you guys probably have seen this already, you know, higher ed, K through 12 tends to catch up with higher ed when it comes to, you know, having like multiple screens in a room. But, you know, being able to have multiple screens and being able to route video between all those screens, that should become much more mainstream, and to be able to do that wirelessly should be something that people do. And so we're looking at, you know, how else do we utilize that in the classroom? The active learning piece of it is obviously a big part of that. How I can just walk into a room and take over all those screens without too much fuss, right? And giving multiple layers of that. So if I want a very simple active learning solution, that's one of the things that I really am focusing on right now, is something that's not as complex as a full, you know, room, but just gives me the ability just to say, okay, I want everything to go there, and I can control that really quickly and easily. But that's where we're seeing that go more. And obviously I can't talk a whole lot about all the things that we're doing.
Oh, come on, you can break news right here, right now. Come on.
But the active learning piece, and then what you saw here, and I think my monitor just turned off, my screen just turned off. I went to sleep there. But what we like to look at is how else we can add more to your ScreenBeam experience, and that's where the administrative tools that I talked about earlier are going to come into play. So the Alert Plus, the Signage Plus, the Message Manager, and then also the instructional tools. And those right now focus much more on K through 12, but I am looking at what we can do more in higher ed. Our instructional tools right now consist of things like a whiteboard app. So that actually comes with it. So in the ScreenBeam itself, you probably know this, that whiteboard interactive flat panels are becoming a commodity right now. There's a race to the bottom on the cost, and they're becoming a commodity in a lot of places. And so what we actually built into the ScreenBeam is a whiteboard app in the ScreenBeam itself, so that even if I have a dumb flat panel that has nothing in it, it's just a big touch screen, I can actually just walk up to the ScreenBeam. There's a little menu that pops off up to the side, and I can select it, and I've got a whiteboard. Well, what else can I do with that whiteboard? So the next level is making those whiteboards collaborative, where I can say when I pull up that whiteboard on the ScreenBeam, it's now going to also pull up on my laptop. And so I can just have access to that. You know, so we're going to see some of that coming around, where we're able to have more collaboration in those spaces in the interactive, but also how teachers can utilize, I'm not going to grab this device here, but how I can utilize my device better. And so teachers have laptops with them a lot of times, and they have devices. So what else can I do with that device? So if I've got a whiteboard, I should be able to access it on my laptop, but still see it on my screen and not have to worry about if that's a touch screen or not. So having some of those, making that a seamless connection is really important for us. And really just trying to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to instructional side, but also most of the time, if you're at a school, even at a higher ed institution, if I'm a front desk person, and I run the building, I have no idea what a ScreenBeam is.
Right.
But if I've now got the ability to message all those screens, and I've got the ability to send an information out through digital signage to all those screens, now all of a sudden that ScreenBeam becomes much more relevant to me as someone who's sitting at the front desk or at the front office in that building. And that is really important for us as well, that you don't have to know, okay, is this going to work on these displays, or is this going to work on this projector? Just put a ScreenBeam on it, and now I've got that access. And so pushing that message out that we're able to be a communication tool, but we're also obviously a wireless display tool that works really well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I just love, like you said, the educational tools alongside, and trying to develop out help for, the people who are using it from a pedagogical standpoint, not just, the manual that tells you how to turn it on and plug it in. It's just feels like a good holistic look at, technology that technology managers can use. So
and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the other instructional tool, which is Orchestrate, which is, again, that's more of a K through 12 tool, because it essentially allows for teachers to see all the student devices on their screens, and that's a really powerful solution that, again, allows you to connect in the room to the ScreenBeam, and students can then collaborate in that environment. And Orchestrate has become a really powerful tool because it allows for teachers to moderate that session in the room. And that's, again, because now students have screens everywhere and in front of them. Essentially, you're creating a wall in front of yourself as a teacher. How do I manage that? And we give you a solution with Orchestrate that is a part of that instructional tools package that says, hey, I want to be able to have the ability to see all my student screens. I want to be able to let them share really quickly and really easily if I want to, by just pressing their screen, looking at a preview of it, and then sending it to the front of the room. Or I want to be able to maybe curate a list of websites that I want them to be accessed for my class session, and I don't want them to stray into other things. So I can say, these are websites that are available right now, and having that kind of control. And so that's really an important part of where we're going, as well as finding those instructional tools that really fit the teacher and what they're trying to do and accomplish in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and I know that those platforms that are, allow you to see all the student computers, and it has a K-12 kind of like safety, keeping an eye on things feel, but it's a very there's a lot of places using that. People are working, it's a programming lab, and they're working through the same program, and that instructor can look in, watch, I can help that person. Oh wait, no, here everybody, look at how this person did that. Look at how this person did that, that instead of everybody looking at their own screen, we're still having a collaborative class, because it's easy for the instructor to just change people's eye level.
I'll ask you a question, I guess, if you don't mind. So the idea...
No, that's not how it works. I ask the questions on the show. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
But the idea of, in a higher ed environment, of students being able to, let's say, just join a session in a classroom. Let's say I'm the teacher and I've connected to the front of the room, and a student says, hey, I would like to share my screen, and they essentially raise their hand and they click on a button and it pops up on the teacher's device. Do you see that as being a relevant solution in higher ed, that just gives the teacher the ability to moderate that session, not necessarily see the student screen? So it wouldn't be like they'd be looking at everything that's on their screens. It would basically be a very simplified version, which we have right now. It's called Orchestrate Lite.
Right.
Do you see that being somewhat relevant, possibly, in a higher ed environment?
Absolutely. And we have similar things that rooms that are set up in ways for people to do things like that. Okay. But the freedom of it just being whoever's there, your device, the way you did it, one person did their homework on their phone and one person did it on their laptop, and it becomes agnostic a little bit to that, rather than go plug it in or look at it. There's the drive towards that type of in-person experience versus a lecture type in-person experience continues to be the force. And the other thing to keep in mind in higher ed is one of the biggest growing student populations in community colleges is high school age students who are on concurrent and dual enrollment. And we have campuses that have lots of local high schoolers on campus every afternoon. So some of that crossover of what they're used to seeing and doing in the morning at their high school for their gen eds, then they're coming for a vocational or a specialized thing in the afternoon. There's a lot of crossover in that. So
yeah, that's
100%.
very true. That's very true. Yeah, I think where we might find it, relevant, I think, is looking at how, because what we do is really more of a moderated environment, but I think the nice thing that we do is still allow the teacher, if it, all things being equal, see a preview of what the student is about to share. And I think that's important, because you don't want a student just saying, I want to share something, and all of a sudden, they're sharing something inappropriate. And so that's one of the differentiators I think that we've done with Orchestrate Lite and Orchestrate, is the teacher can actually see, before they share, a live preview of, okay, this is what's on my screen right now. So yeah, I think that could be something that we could look at, making that more universal. But yeah, cool, good to put.
Well, David, I got to tell you, I thought I knew everything about Screen. I always think I know everything about everything, but I've learned a ton, just in having this conversation, and it's fun to think, to hear you talk about capabilities, and I'm sure all the listeners are doing the same. Like, okay, what would that look like in this space, in that space? What would that look like on my campus? So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of daydream about that, and think about where those things would go. If people wanted to, obviously get in touch with you, get connected, get their hands on one of these devices to try, put it on their network and see if it scares anybody, or, show people how easy it is. Like, what's the best way for them, for folks who are just kind of hearing about this or saying like, no, I really need to take a look at it to get that started? Yeah.
Well, first I would say is there's a local representative in your area, but feel free, if they're listening to this podcast, I'll give my email out. It's dlopez@screenbeam.com. You're welcome to contact me to ask any questions about what we talked about here. But I think if you go to screenbeam.com, you can go to our contact us solution and find your local representative. Our local representatives, they are awesome. They're very knowledgeable, obviously, about our product. They're going to be able to help you and send you out. If you're interested in a demo unit, they can send you out a demo unit, so you can kick the tires on it. And then obviously we have a great support team that's going to help with whatever you need to be able to do. But it's also important, I think, especially since I've been to some of the HETMA events and you guys are really big on working with partners. I think it's also important to know that the vendor partners that we have are also really valuable. So if you reach out to a vendor and say, hey, I want to know more about ScreenBeam, please don't hesitate to do that. If you have a partner that you work with on a regular basis, that helps us also, because people are asking about what we do. So whatever you're more comfortable with, but if you want direct information, go to screenbeam.com and look up your contact that's for your area, and they'll be able to help you out.
Yeah, I'll say thank you for that. There's so many companies that have good regional representation, and it almost is word of mouth to figure out who yours is. And it's so clear on your website who that is. So, and then I'll throw a shout out to Brian Crisco, who's Northwest, but my rep is Carolyn Fernandez. They're great and been fun to hang out with. And you can tell, reps from companies that, get a lot of support versus ones that don't, by kind of how they go about their business. And they've both been great folks to work with.
I'll leave you with one last tidbit, and I've used this a lot, but I think instructional and IT often shake hands in the hallway, but they rarely hold hands. And I think instructional and IT and higher ed AV need to hold hands with their instructors. I think higher ed AV does better than IT because I think they're two different animals. I think higher ed AV does better, but I still think that's one of the big pitfalls that I talk about when I talk about tech conscious leadership, is that people need to hold hands in the hallway, not just shake hands when it comes to figuring out what to put in their classrooms. I think that's super important as you move forward. And so I've seen great successes, but I've also seen a lot of failure because that doesn't happen. So.
Well, that is a fantastic place to end on. I love that saying right there, which is, no, don't just shake hands on the way by, but hold hands as we work together on what we're doing here. So, David, thank you for your time. I really appreciate talking to you today.
Thanks, Ryan, so much. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking soon.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in to today's episode of HETMA Events. Please make sure you are refreshing higherEdav.com every day for fresh content. My name is Ryan Gray, and for today, that's all the time we have for HETMA Presents. Thank you for tuning in to HETMA Presents. This show is a production of Higher Ed AV Media. Please visit higheredav.com to learn more about this show and a host of others. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of our respective institutions, employers, or sponsors. We'll be back soon with another installment of HETMA Presents.